Welcome to the Dr. Remina Panjwani Show, where we're optimizing wellness together. I am your host, Dr. Remina. On today's episode, I have Dr. Shannon Crawford, who is a licensed psychologist and the CEO of Crawford Clinics, where she and her team provide innovative psychotherapy services using a holistic approach, an innovative approach known as Restoring Self-Cohesion Approach, RSC. Dr. Crawford also uses RSC into her work as a performance psychologist for leaders. Aside from being a psychologist, Dr. Crawford is an author, keynote speaker, and hosts the podcast Unlock You. Let's jump right in. I have a lovely guest, Dr. Shannon Crawford. I am so excited to introduce her to y'all. She does amazing work, not only around in the DFW area, but she's going to be crossing state lines with her Crawford Clinics. So without further ado, let's welcome you, Dr. Shannon. Welcome.
Thank you. It's so fun to work with someone like you that gets it, that we are so much more advanced. And when we have that information, we can really help people upgrade their internal world as well as their physical world to give them the best quality of life and relationships and all the fun things. So I'm excited to jump in with you today.
Absolutely. Oh, this is going to be such a fun episode and very informative too. Mm-hmm. It is going to be combining all of the holistic realms, right? Yeah. And a little bit extra towards the end for you entrepreneurs. So a little bit, I always love to hear how everyone has a story. I would love to hear how you started and how you got here and exactly what you do, because what you do is very unique. It's not your traditional talk therapy.
Right. Absolutely. So I just grew up in a family that was nice and we don't do conflict. All of it gets swept conveniently under the rug and we love each other and we just don't talk about problems. And so my little issues were not being talked about, and I had good behavior modification techniques, but anxiety, depression, self-harm. My left arm was all cut up from self-harm, self-rejection, reckless behaviors, eating disorders. I mean, I had a whole gamut, and it didn't make sense. I live in a normal family, intact, loves me, would give me anything that they could, that, they were able to. And yet I had all these issues. And so I tried going to traditional counseling. And because it wasn't conscious, then one lady literally rolled her eyes at me and said, "Why don't you come back when you're not being resistant?" And I said, "No, genuinely, I don't remember." I was in college at this point. I don't remember some of my memories from childhood. So just a ding, ding, ding. If anybody is listening and you have some blank spots in your memory, it may be, not necessarily always, but there may be a reason the unconscious mind decided to protect you and insulate you as a survival mechanism. But if we never go back and address and resolve that, then that's still running in the background. Like if you're a supercomputer, that's like leaving a virus quarantined on the inside. You're not aware of it. It's quarantined outside of the software of your day-to-day life, but yet it's still affecting you. And so that started me on a beautiful journey. My family completely supported me, went towards psychology, and I had a good mentor that was like, "You can't do anything with a bachelor's. Why not get your doctorate?" And I'm like 21 going, "Yeah, I'll apply for a doctorate," right? So there goes my 20s, like goodbye. And so I've just spent so long investing in quantum physics, clinical psychology, peak performance, physical health, biological, alternative medicine, to try to find what is that sweet spot of helping people find the most streamlined approach to upgrade their internal world for the greatest external impact. So that's what I do. It's called Restoring Self-Cohesion. I'm the CEO of Crawford Clinics, where we do mental health reimagined, taking it far beyond just talk counseling. We do EMDR, internal family systems. We have multiple protocols that we use to help get to that hard drive to upgrade our clients personally, relationally, in their family, and in optimizing career, as I do as an executive coach.
That is impressive. And that's amazing. You're helping so many people do that. Mm-hmm. And, I think sometimes, even though we all want to live an optimal life and thrive, and of course, lifestyle, everything is tied in because we're mind, body, and spirit as well. Mm-hmm. How does one know that they do need therapy? I mean, what are some signs? Because sometimes you could just be going on day to day and certain triggers, mood disorders, and trauma
people don't know are affecting them.
Oh,
So how do you
gosh.
address that?
Such a great point, because there's stuff that we've never diagnosed, we don't know, it's just our normal. And I've never lived inside someone else's normal to have the contrast. Like growing up with depression, I have major depressive disorder as a child. I didn't know what that was like to not have that. And it wasn't until I started a journey of going, oh, I went to a normal doctor who said your thyroid is in the normal range. So they didn't do the thorough panel, and I just continued to live with undiagnosed Hashimoto's, which is the autoimmune condition where your body is literally attacking the thyroid, which is the seat of hormones, chemicals, age, mood. Everything is affected by that. Digestion, all kinds of health concern mysteries. And I had a normal doctor that was like, hey, you fall in the normal range, you're fine. And they didn't do a thorough panel. So I think as a physical illustration of that, we also have that in the psychological. That low grade anxiety many of us have, like almost like an engine is just idling all the time. Or a low grade, just like sadness. Like, why do I feel like this? Why bother? Why try? Or a social anxiety. It's easier to just isolate and just stay home and watch Netflix and PJs instead of, actually going out and venturing into the world. So we get comfortable. Like many of our clients will say, no, I don't have phobias. I don't have anxiety. I don't have depression. I just don't leave the house. I don't go on elevators. I don't fly. I don't go to work. I don't leave the house, And so we start to live within the bandwidth of our comfort level. But our comfort zone gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And before we know it, we're like the frog that's getting boiled, not realizing we're allowing anxiety, depression, relationship issues, past trauma to really shrink our quality of life. So in answering your question, how do I know? On one side, I would say it depends on the type of therapy you're going to. So if you're like, okay, I really want to work on, anxiety, depression, I want to reduce these symptoms, probably you would start kind of practical because that's conscious, you're aware. And so you would go that route. You can also do self-help books. There's e-courses like what we have on crawfordclinics.com. There's lots of resources out there. If you have stuff that you're like, why do I feel like this even though I know it's not true? Like many people feel like an imposter in their own life. They're like, I know my family loves me. I know I'm smart and I'm capable and I may even have a degree or started a business. And yet I just kind of feel like eventually someone's going to see through that I don't know what I'm doing. So when we live with that over a long period of time, we've learned to compensate. Kind of like walking with crutches, your spine may be out of alignment metaphorically and you're favoring that hip and you're protecting an injury and you learn how to adapt. But that's not healthy. So that's where I would highly recommend a certified restoring self-cohesion therapist that can actually help you get to the unconscious. And when I say that on a spectrum, you could have hard stuff like, oh man, like I think I'm bipolar. I think I've got really extreme highs and lows. I think I've got maybe a personality disorder. I'm really fearful of rejection or abandonment. I tend to push people away and then sabotage and pull them back. So it could be on that, or it could be in the just day-to-day of like, man, I just don't want to be so critical toward myself. I don't want to have the inner dictator that I've done all the mindset work and I've done all the self-help, but it's not going away. I'm still having to combat it. Then that's when I would say you probably want more of a sophisticated, nuanced approach, like restoring self-cohesion, to get to the root of that. And then I would say, just like I would go to Dr. Remina, because I want to have optimal health. I think historically people have considered counseling as like, oh, last case scenario. Like that's like the worst case. You have to actually go to counseling versus continuing education of stewarding my physical health, proactively knowing what my blood work looks like, or my mental health, how do I optimize that? So I would also say in times of transition and adjustment, it's a great idea to just establish that relationship with someone that's a good restoring self-cohesion therapist that can help you go through the transition into college or starting a new job, starting a business, getting married, having a baby. These big milestones actually open up different parts of our soul and our unconscious mind. And so lots of dynamics can start surfacing, and people try to just whack-a-mole and shut it back down instead of realizing that's the most fruitful time for growth if you know how to capitalize and use that toward your leverage.
Oh my goodness, yes. There's so much I want to follow up on. So of course, with same thing like with functional medicine, a lot of times people think that's their normal. And same thing with the mind, right? Like they think that being maybe having that stomach pain, that fatigue, that anxiety, the mood, and staying inside all the time is normal until you know that it's not. And then to uncover that bandage to get to root cause. And I think, a couple of things on that. So before we talk about what exactly RSC is, what is the difference between your conscious mind and your unconscious mind?
Yes, I love that question. So think of you like a big supercomputer, like the most sophisticated in the world. It does a ton of things automatically for you. So the fact that you can drive home and not think about where you're driving and you end up there safely and you're like, oh, wow, I got here already. That's because you have tons of processes going on below the surface. So in neuroscience, they call it subconscious, which means the automaticity of what your brain is doing for you. Like right now, our heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, hormones, tons of things are being regulated. I'm learning to kind of recognize feedback of how loud is my voice. Don't pick your nose in public. Like there's all these kind of processes going on at the subconscious level. While the conscious mind is like the top of the iceberg where I'm thinking about what I'm thinking and I'm self-aware, I'm reflecting on it. So I like to compare it to an internal board meeting. So if I were bringing my organization together, I'm the CEO, so I'm going to bring my key players into a room and ask each of their input. I'm going to ask blind spot. I'm going to be like, hey, what am I not seeing? Or what's your strength? And how can we bring that into the committee? So that would be the conscious mind. And then the subconscious is classical conditioning. It's learned behaviors and responses, the procedural memory that you can floss your teeth and you can drive cars and walk and talk and all of that. So like if a stroke patient, they might lose some of that subconscious. And then there's the Freudian term for unconscious, which means there's a part, one or more, that have said on the inside, I don't think it's okay for me to know that. So for instance, I had Hashimoto's, which means my body is literally attacking one system against another. Now, when I did therapy, depth therapy, not talk counseling, but when I actually went into the inner world and discovered, oh, I have a part of me rejecting the shame part of me that's holding the memory of being abused as a kid. So someone outside of my family had sexually abused me as a child. That was too threatening, scary, overwhelming. I don't know how to process that. So all of that got shut down, and the me that's the problem, metaphorically, to my inner world. So my brain went, oh no, you're bad, so we need to hide that. So that created an inner conflict where I turned against myself psychologically. And if you think about it, body, soul, spirit were three-dimensional. My soul was attacking another part of my soul. Just like in the mirror of my body was attacking another system of my body. When I brought the trauma conscious into awareness, so that's unconscious now brought into the conscious committee of what I allow myself to be aware of, and we resolved that, and I took off the shame, the false responsibility, that wasn't my fault. A child believed on accident that it was my fault, and it wasn't. And so now when there was healing and reconciliation between those parts of self, I no longer have Hashimoto's. My blood work shows I no longer have an autoimmune condition when traditional medicine said you're going to live with that the rest of your life. And so it's nice to know, like functional medicine doctors like Dr. Remina, that specializes in helping, let's get to the root. Let's help your system learn how to properly function. And our symptoms that drive us crazy actually are illuminating and drawing things into our awareness. So when I say conscious, I mean the things you're aware of. And then subconscious is the stuff that your brain and your system is doing without you having to think about it. Very handy. Sometimes it's not helpful though, because we can have classically conditioned response to, phobias, fears of things. And you're like, why do I still get anxious around dogs? Because you have a classically conditioned, that's subconscious. And then we have unconscious, where one or more parts of me are like, oh no, we don't do anger in my family, right? Like we're all nice, we're all polite. All that has to go underground. Or I work with a lot of male executives. And so sadness isn't allowed. I have to be the alpha. I have to be strong. I have to bow up and be brave for my family or whatever the dynamic is. So then the sadness goes underground. And that part of self that holds that is kind of metaphorically in an archaic room outside of conscious awareness. The tricky thing is there's still only one of me and it's one computer. So kind of like a minimized browser window that I have one computer I'm looking at right now as we're talking. But I also have multiple minimized browser windows that I'm not seeing, I'm not aware of, and yet they're running in the background and they can still be corrupted. The viruses can still be running. That can still be happening outside of my awareness. So that's where when people say, why do I self-sabotage? Why do I move toward a goal and then I procrastinate? Why do I talk myself out of opportunities? Why do I think that I'm the only one that doesn't know what I'm doing and everybody else is the adult and professional and they're good at everything and I always feel less than? Oh, probably because you have a whole bunch of dynamics. Some are minimized and you need a process like restoring self-cohesion to bring that in the light so you can bring it into the committee and then resolve it and X out of that browser window so it's not affecting you.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, you certainly have become so strong and successful to overcome everything you just even talked about. So that's amazing. That's something to be so proud of, which I'm sure you are. It shows in your work. So, to kind of talk about how that looks like on a daily basis, of course. So everyone has patterns, right? It goes back to that inner child work.
Yes.
And then of course how that shows up in adult life. But when you're working with people, what does that look like? Because when you go to the traditional therapy situation, you're going to be thrown maybe some meds, maybe some antidepressants, maybe some simple like therapy, but how do you actually help people and what tools do you use? Because it's a unique approach. It's not just talk therapy. How do you actually work through the work?
Yes, I love that. So I would say, again, very similar to functional medicine, that your job, I would assume, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is you're trying to actually help the body communicate where there's a misalignment, something needs to be addressed, and let's support the body so that it properly functions, rather than just trying to suppress symptoms. We do that in therapy. That, of course, we want our clients' symptoms to go down. Don't get me wrong. But our goal is actually to honor what our soul is trying to tell us. And our soul doesn't necessarily, when it's unconscious, doesn't have a voice, but it uses symptoms, kind of like a child that's throwing a temper tantrum, and you're like, just put them in the closet, like, quiet, stop it. That's what we do to parts of ourselves. You're the problem. Instead of going, hey, are you not getting attention? Are you not getting acknowledged? What memory needs to be brought back into awareness? What emotion needs to be comforted? Many people comfort eat. And so then they have health conditions around food issues, hypertension, diabetes, all kinds of things. And if Dr. Remina and I work together, we would be like, wow, here's the physical side of that, of honoring and helping the body heal itself. And here's the psychological element of how we use food, shopping, success, porn, all these things as humans to try to comfort parts of our soul that are not being acknowledged. So I would say the distinction of a symptom reduction modality of counseling, which there's lots of different ones out there, and I want to sound very honoring because we integrate a lot of them. I'm not saying one is better than another. They're all great. Just like a little bit of Western medicine, a little bit of functional together is fantastic.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we're saying we just want to honor below the symptom reduction. The symptom points me to a misalignment. So we picture body, soul, spirit, just like the vertebrae of your spine, that if any of those vertebrae get out of alignment, your bulging disc, let's say, it pinches the nerve, you're going to have tingly fingers. In our society, we go, oh, I have depression, I need medication. Oh, I have anxiety, I need a breathing technique. And those are great. I'm not against any of them. But none of those approaches are actually going back to where the spinal cord got misaligned. And so if we don't heal the bulging disc in the vertebrae, we're going to consistently be chasing symptoms and trying to fix symptoms and teach people to cope with that versus, hey, that grounding technique or that medication for a season might be very valuable. But that's not the end of our healing journey. When you're ready to go to that next level, you would go to Dr. Remina to get the physical part and some probably soul part as well. And then we would help you go at Crawford Clinics, hey, what's the root of that? How do I honor the voice of this part of me that I have disavowed, silenced? Like, for instance, if I can, I have a client that it happens a lot. You know, I'm thinking of one in particular, but it's pretty frequent that people feel rejected by others. And so it's kind of depressing. There's social anxiety. It's awkward. It's hard to get a job. It's hard to go on dating apps or get to know new people because there's this pervasive feeling of just kind of feeling not good enough, unwanted, rejected. And how do I get past that, Dr. Crawford? And so our job is to say, hey, maybe that external feeling may actually be an internal reality. Are there any parts of you that you are rejecting? And that felt sense of pervasive rejection you're perceiving coming from the outside world may actually be a projection because it's what you're doing to parts of you right now. When we do the depth work, it's not new age, it's not hypnosis, nothing like that. It's an actual process within restoring self-cohesion. And we take people to honor that part of me that I said, oh, you're bad, you're not allowed to be a part of me. You're going to cause me to get rejected, or people aren't going to like me if they see this, or that feeling when you're hearing someone say, I love you, but your inner voice goes, yeah, but if you knew everything, you wouldn't say that. If you knew everything about me, you wouldn't like me. You wouldn't hire me. You wouldn't want me as your spouse, whatever. And so our job is to say, hey, what's going on inside, and give a voice to heal that and repair the relationship within the psychological makeup. Then that part that's been cut off in the unconscious mind, now brought conscious. I have seen, I mean, it's not an infomercial, so I can't say every problem solved in 5 steps, right? But I can tell you, I've been doing this a very long time and time again, people organically start to lean in with confidence to relationships when they are no longer unconsciously rejecting a part of themselves. They're not perceiving rejection in their outside world, helping them be grounded, centered, confident, joyful, asking questions, showing interest. And then the self-fulfilling prophecy in a good way is, I deserve relationship. I'm doing it inside of myself now. And now people respond to that positive dynamic that we're putting out in the world.
Absolutely. I mean, people can feel that change in frequency. It's very palpable.
Yes,
especially
absolutely.
If someone's already done the work, or if you can tell that someone needs work. Yeah. So it definitely is helpful in that. Yeah. When there's so much going on in the world today, especially, I feel like, the mental health crisis, there's just so much for us to, as a society, to even keep up with. Yeah. And when you think about, it's very influenced by lifestyle. And yes. It is connected, right? Like I remember on one of your posts on social media, you had talked about sugar being one of the toxins. And that's just one, right? And like you mentioned, there are so many toxins out there, right? Yeah. And what's interesting too is, of course, the big Ivy League institutions are bringing forward that the lifestyle choices are also interconnected with mood and your brain and everything. So let's kind of dive into that when we talk about how the lifestyle choices, like when you're exposing yourself to toxins. I mean, we're talking about all toxins. We got social media, we got like digital, we got what we put into our body, no time for self-care and so forth. So how that leads into what you would do to prevent depression. So let's talk about that.
Absolutely. It's such a great question. So I think if we start at the beginning, what we know are, just like for your body, You need oxygen, you need water, you need sunlight, just like a plant. Like there's certain ingredients to make that person or that plant thrive. Similarly, as humans, we need good ebb and flow of high stress, which is the good cortisol when you're in eustress is the term for it, of like, hey, I'm productive, I'm on, I have a sense of accomplishment, there's investment meaning. So you have a good amount of cortisol, and then you're supposed to have the actual flow down where you let yourself rest, you get off of digital things, you let your brain be still and quiet, you do things like grounding, which is when you don't have rubber on your feet and you can actually connect with the earth. There's a negative polarity to the earth, so it's like a battery recharging the human. You get sunlight, you get all your vitamin D, you get around people, you get hugs and oxytocin, you get all of these sweet things. You go to sleep, you get a nap. Irony, of course, practice what you preach, right? So yesterday I was going from client to this and teaching at the university, and then I was going to have a meeting for our business, and it's just like multiple hats. So anybody listening, if you are doing lots of things at once, I see you. And there was like prep for the meeting, and I was like, actually, I'm going to take a nap. Took a nap, drank a tiny bit of caffeine, and I was like, I love my life again. Like I wanted to fire myself before. And I'm pretty dramatic, right? I'm not literally going to, but I'm like, so feel the things. And just literally a 15-minute nap. And I have to remind my clients as well as myself, these basic ingredients of drink more water, have an apple instead of too much caffeine, Shannon. There's things that if you take care of your system and you follow your natural circadian rhythm, you'll do so great. But the night before that, I was stressed and worried about this business meeting. We're launching a new deployment. It's a big deal. It's really exciting, but also expensive and nerve-wracking. So the night before, I caught myself scrolling social media. So the tricky thing about social media and digital things is it's a pseudo way to engage your brain. You think you're just being entertained, you're getting a brain relax, whatever. But in reality, your brain is still on. And so the digital and electromagnetic frequencies, all of the things emitted from that phone or the tablet or laptop, and my brain is still having to think. It feels like I'm zoning out, but you're actually still on instead of truly entering into rest. And that's where, for me, things that are spiritually enlivening, being in nature, being in sunlight, doing alternative things away from digital products really help me reset. But me, as much as anybody else, I'll catch myself falling for the low-hanging fruit of this is just easy. I don't eat fast food, but I understand how families that are like on the run, they've got kids doing this and they've got that and they have to work. Like it's easy to eat the garbage food of our society because it's low-hanging fruit. There's no judgment in that. I get it. But if we would eat fresh, healthy ingredients that come from the earth, they've been nourished by the earth, it'll nourish our bodies and we'll feel so much better. So my discipline, I'm trying to work, you can hold me accountable, is to actually go on a 5-minute walk, a 10-minute walk in between tasks where I take no electronics, I'm silent, I'm quiet, and I visualize love like a waterfall filling my heart. I take the lid off my heart and my imagination and just picture unconditional love filling me up, refreshing. And as that happens, I'll now come back to the next meeting recharged. And those are the kinds of things that keep us replenished versus, to your question, if we don't do that, and we're eating food that's really genetically modified, it's got a bunch of toxins, it's full of dyes and things that are not good for us, that causes the inflammation system, the immune system has to get activated. It could be leaky gut, you could have candida, which is the yeast overgrowth. That is a ton of energy because you're a finite being. And so now your body's having to now deal with all of these health things, and that's a lot. And then we have water that's not always the best because it's got fluoride, it's got chlorine and all these things. Or we're drinking water with plastic bottles, so it's leaching into the plastic, right? And then we have toxic thoughts. And so then that's not good for us, So we have the food front, we have the lack of sleep, we're staying up ruminating, or we're scrolling social media or watching a movie, which is blue light, inhibiting the ability to go into deep sleep. You might have intrusive thoughts that wake you up or nightmares. Those are all signals, hey, you're not doing okay. Somebody inside needs to be addressed. I'm not saying multiple personality disorder. That's what most people think when I say that. Just think of parts of you. Like you have you have 12 different systems that have to work together for you to be a functioning human. Endocrine, skeletal, muscular, all of these have to work together. And so if we aren't honoring each system, then you'll have a deficit and you'll have a weakness. So again, going back to depression, if we are staying in a chronic state of stress, and stress doesn't always mean I perceive it as stress, right? Like I could be on, mom, dad, going, work, busy, cleaning, organizing, doing the next thing, checking the emails. That's on. That means you're using a ton of cortisol and you have left eustress, which is high performing, and you've now entered into distress. Distress means you're literally borrowing from the immune system. You're borrowing from your skeletal system. You're more likely to be immune compromised after periods of prolonged stress because that's a lot to keep borrowing from your system. So if instead we're like, hey, create the rhythm, watch your circadian rhythm, let yourself take the nap, let yourself be on when you're on. And then like before this podcast, I was a guest on someone else before. So I just went on a walk and got some quality time with a friend and took a nap. And now I'm here and I'm on again, but my energy level feels positive. Many people don't know that their depression is actually the result of burnout. They've burned through all their good chemicals. And so now you've bottomed out and it's like fatigue, depression, anhedonia, which is the lack of pleasure. I don't want to do anything. I don't want to be around anybody. And they think that's depression, which actually it's a lifestyle of chronically being on, overusing, and going into a deficit where you're actually weakening and compromising your immune system, more likely to have inflammation, which is a root to a lot of sickness. There's also seasonal allergies. There's lots of things that if we're not stewarding our physical health, psychological, spiritual health, then we think we're in depression, but really, if we move back, we realize it's a lifestyle that's perpetuating this.
Yeah, absolutely. So well explained. And it's really all interconnected. It's all interconnected. Yeah, and so I guess the importance of self-care, of course, as explained, it can show up good or bad, balance or imbalance. Now, when we talk about how we interact with the rest of our family and the traumas and the generational traumas that we carry, how do you approach that? And how does that show up?
Absolutely. So that's part of the epigenetics research, that our genetics are actually impacted, and there's a great resource, The Body Keeps the Score, of how our physical body is directly impacted by trapped emotion. And then we understand that that can actually get into the DNA and it can transfer. So when people say, oh, my aunt was kind of a worrywart, my dad, my grandma, and we all kind of got this anxious thing, you could literally have trapped emotion of anxiety, some of which you inherited. So it's not just that you have a genetic disposition. You can, but you could also have literal energy of emotion. And then you have inherited trauma, that's the transmission of generational patterns, which means my generation's modeled certain kind of dynamics, and then that goes forward. Now, the interesting thing is, for instance, a lot of people know if you are a child of an alcoholic family, you're probably going to have certain characteristics. They also did studies, and they found that the grandchildren, even if you take the substance out of the family, and so let's say, grandparent was alcoholic, the parent now grows up, or the child now grows up, becomes a parent of the next generation, they take alcohol out of their family, it's not in the home, no substances, the grandchildren have the exact same tendencies as the child of the alcoholic family, because not processing emotion, not doing challenging conversations that lead to intimacy versus we shut down or we explode. There's certain dynamics that it's not just the trauma itself, it's the inherited trauma. For instance, one of my clients had a mystery anxiety issue, and it took us a while. And because I have a redemptive view that I believe people are actually made good, that we're not broken, and so it helps me stay curious. and to stay like, what else could there be? What's the riddle? Instead of just a quick, oh, you have anxiety, here's a pill. I'm not against pills, but I think that's very reductionistic when we think of how multifaceted and beautifully complex we are. So her mystery anxiety, it was not getting better. So finally, we did an internal board meeting and realized there was a child part of her that had picked up mom's anxiety. So probably modeling as well as inherited trapped emotion. So when we recognized that, she asked her mom about anxiety, and the mom confided, the girl her whole life did not know, mom came home and saw dad commit suicide. So mom had this perpetual, I love you, I'm worried about you, text me when you get there, are you okay, you need a jacket? And so she had frequency, energy of fear and panic and control, but it was in such love, because mom loves her daughter, she's not trying to be controlling, but that would be an example of like, there's inherited trapped emotion and dynamics. Because the child in the mom felt the belief that if I'm not perfect, if I'm not there to rescue, bad things will happen. And so with love on accident, her good heart ended up conveying to the child who's now my client as an adult, realizing, oh my gosh, I'm not capable. Mom thinks I'm not smart, or I'm not going to remember, or bad things are going to happen. The implied message is bad things happen and you need me here to make sure you're okay. Totally not intentional. But it's that riddle. And when that came conscious and she was able to release that burden and then now release trapped emotions, and there's things like emotion code where they use magnets to release trapped emotion. You can also visualize with the intentionality to release that trapped emotion out of your cells, out of your body. And I'll picture like God's holding a magnet and I'm exhaling it out of my body and it just getting pulled out. And that's also been a really interesting way to release trapped emotion. So her anxiety fully remitted finally when we got to that riddle of something that wasn't even an event that happened to her per se. So that's kind of the interesting thing about the inherited, whether it's in the dynamic of how the family runs and or the generational dynamics that get passed down, or the generational traumas. There's a lot of interesting research with the Holocaust survivors, with people who've come through slavery, or with indigenous American populations, that there are certain inherited traumas that go forward. And so knowing that actually takes so much false responsibility off of us. Like, I actually may have been encoded with this at a genetic level. It's not something as a weakness in me. That may be something I inherited. But now with epigenetics, I realize I can actually turn off those genes. I can change my genetics by addressing and resolving and detoxing from trapped emotion and getting that out of the system.
Oh gosh, that is so profound. It just, when you're a child, when you're a parent, there's just things that you want to do out of goodwill for the most part. But it's amazing how profound the effects can be and the importance of understanding the patterns. Yes. And now, speaking of patterns, when we talk about mindset, because this is all psychologically and everything is connected as well, a segue into the population you also work with is when you're doing executive and performance coaching. Mm-hmm. So mindset and all these patterns most certainly plays a role, as of course you can attest to. But what I would love to get your insight into is when you work with all these top performing executives and performers, high performers, what is, I would say two things. So what is a common strength or mindset that they do, or habits that they have that leads them to be successful? And on the opposite end, what's something that could be a barrier that is difficult to overcome?
You know, the irony, because that's a great question, is it's usually the exact same. Our strength is usually our blind spot, because I'm so good at it that I've never actually had to develop the other areas within my personality or life skills, and we start to overly rely on our strengths. So if we compared it to the physical body, let's say somebody had a limp on the left side, they're going to overcompensate and really lean in on the right side of their body. They're going to really put all the pressure on the right side. Or if you had a dental surgery, let's say, and the one side is hurt, you're going to chew on the opposite side. So you're really overly compensating, overly using a natural strength to a point that actually it can cause misalignment, fatigue, overexhaustion, wearing something out. Secondly, I'm not disciplining myself to say, but I also need this other side of me developed. And in order to have work-life balance, to actually enjoy leadership, I work with a lot of people in media and the arts and performance, medical field, business owners, entrepreneurs. And so they want to love that thing. And many times the research shows once you make it your profession and you get paid to do it, the satisfaction usually goes down. One of those things might be the ingredient to be a high achiever. Often that overcompensates. And so without realizing my natural work ethic, my self-discipline, my ability to burn the midnight oil, wake up early, go to bed late, do it again tomorrow, that's glamorized in many of those fields. The problem is your work ethic that helps you get there, if not stewarded properly, is the same thing that's going to burn you out, make you difficult to live with, a difficult boss and leader and influencer. It's a great strength when it's stewarded in a holistic way. So we'll work with our clients. We do, strength-based assessment and strength-based leadership, find out what are those natural strengths you lean into. And now let's help you develop and cultivate the other sides of your personality. So for instance, if you're a high achiever, then we need to really cultivate what does humor and play and silliness look like. So you're so good at this that you stopped enjoying your art. You stopped enjoying your medical practice. You stopped enjoying the patent or the brand or the thing you've developed in business. What would it look like to become more playful and carefree? I'm not saying irresponsible, and I'm not saying that you become a goofball and people don't respect you, but I'm saying that breath of fresh air. Think of it as a committee member. So this dominant dictator of driver success part, and every coaching person and curriculum you hear will always encourage that. But if left unchecked, it becomes an inner dictator where people don't let themselves go to sleep until they've checked every single email, they've crossed everything off their to-do list, and then feel bad about themselves, like they're not a good person or successful, afraid of failing if they don't do everything on the checklist. That is imbalanced. And then it's really lonely for your loved ones to live with you because you're so myopic on accident. But if we cultivate your whole committee and you're fun to be around, you're responsible, but you're still nurturing or kind or playful, that you have an intellectual side and you're still pursuing your own intellectual development apart from work. I know it's crazy. It's crazy as an entrepreneur or media or business to actually think you could develop other sides of you, which in the end, of course, make you more robust, more interesting, more well-rounded, and cultivating the creative side of you. So many people, again, if they get very type A and driven, no matter what industry, a lot of times creativity feels like, oh yeah, that's a pile that I've created that I should get to at some point. But creativity unlocks innovation. So if I'm so driven, task-oriented, achieving, and if I'm a driver and I stop being creative, even as a creative, I work with a lot of people in media. They become so driven, memorizing the lines, writing the script, doing the dance. They get so driven that they stop just being a child who's carefree, who's playful, and creating something new. Because when you're baking, when you're gardening, when you're painting, when you're doing something that doesn't have money or tied to self-improvement or something at the end, you just get to do it because you enjoy it. Your brain is freed up, and you're accessing new parts of the brain that help unlock innovation. So your brain is thinking the whole time, and whatever you were working on, it's now freed up to access creative problem solving. It's able to access innovation and ideas that come from deeper places than just that cerebral head knowledge. When that happens, you will find you're more likely to lead in your industry because you're actually tapping into your intuition, your gut, and your creative brilliance. And I have a whole e-course on that.
Yes, I mean, and you could see that when you see people in their flow state and being creative and in their essence. It's a beautiful vision to see that. And you are one of those. And as we slowly start wrapping up, you know, you have a podcast, you're a speaker, and you have a book, and I mean, you're doing all those things. So those entrepreneurs that are listening, which one did you do first, and how did you go about that?
That's a great question. What did I do first? I think a lot of life is toggling, where they kind of take different forefront, you know, and then one takes a back seat. I would say in grad school, I was always that work hard, get your homework done type personality. But in grad school, I just decided one day when I was really stressed, I think I'm artistic. I'm going to paint. So I just asked some friends to borrow their stuff. I didn't want a big investment. So I put fun worship music on, and I just started painting in grad school. And I was like, oh my gosh, and ideas would come. And I also had some healing in my soul. Some things started to come as I was painting and able to express things that my conscious mind wasn't aware of. And now I could see it visually. And I was like, whoa, this is really deep. You know, art therapy is a real thing. And so I kind of stumbled into that. And then being a business owner, so I was a psychologist first, worked for someone else, entrepreneur starting in 2012. And as a business owner, I started craving work-life balance. And I was like, oh, I'm going to start baking. I'm going to start cooking. And baking was too many rules, so I gave that up. But I love cooking. I love the art of trying new things and mixing it together and seeing what happens. And now in this phase, I'm really enjoying gardening. So on our Instagram, we've been tracking kind of my very immature, brand new genesis of gardening, and we shall see. So that's my journey.
Oh, I love that. Well, that is amazing. I would love to talk to you even more, but then we're already at 45 minutes.
Wow, that's awesome.
It goes so fast when we're having such a good conversation, but where can people find you if they want to work with you?
Yeah, so we have CrawfordClinics.com with an S, CrawfordClinics.com. And we have a whole team of therapists that are all Restoring Self-Cohesion certified. And I'm obviously biased, but they are highly vetted, highly trained. It's my personal team. I love them so much. And then we have the Unlock You with Dr. Shannon Crawford podcast. I'm an adjunct professor, so the U is actually just a U, like university versus YOU. And then we have e-courses on my website, DrShannonCrawford.com, on the e-learning page. So Shannon spelled differently. It's Dr. Shannon, SHANNAN, because in Gaelic, they differentiate male and female, like in Spanish, DrShannonCrawford.com. And at Crawford Clinics, there's also some e-courses, and we have e-groups that can go through those courses with me currently, and then our team in the future. So anyone who wants to jump in, this is the time to start applying, probably in the next, I don't know when this is going to air, but soonish from the time this is recording, we're going to start accepting applications to go through a virtual group to learn restoring self-cohesion in a really safe, fun, collaborative environment so that we can empower people to do it at home.
Oh, I love that. Yes, all of those links will be in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time. It was such a pleasure, and I can't keep, I look forward to working more with you and talking to you more. So Thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Bye. Bye, everybody.
If you enjoyed today's show, share with your friends and family, and of course, subscribe. Thank you so much for your support.